and a Kevlar helmet on, and probably batteries for some Thor systems, and minesweepers. So you're looking for bombs in the ground, and then on top of it, you have a Thor, which is basically a radio jammer, and it jams radio signals so that they can't communicate with each other and or remotely set off an explosive device. So then you have like batteries for that type of stuff.
So you're carrying probably 40, 50 pounds
Yeah.
easily a day.
Right.
If you're going out every day.
Yeah. And it could be variable, but that's probably on average about maybe plus or minus a few depending on armor and stuff. But
so we live in California, and psilocybin's going to be on the ballot for next year to be legalized.
mm-hmm.
And I know MAPS is working with PTSD patients from the military and so forth to try to, correct some of that. Did you come back with PTSD symptoms?
It was definitely a interesting, switch coming back, because you go from this really intense, high alert environment where your head is on a swivel and, you're just kind of watching your back and everybody else's constantly, to over like a 2 to 3 day journey being back in the States with your family, and basically everything here is the same. Nothing's changed over here, and you've just gone through, something pretty significant over there. So I'd say that was probably the hardest transition to make, was just trying to reconcile that, the huge discrepancy between what life is over there and what life is over here. So it was just a lot to take in, and it's a lot of shifting views and priorities and stuff like that. That's all combined. So yeah, it was definitely difficult.
Now you said you 2 to 3 days coming back. What are the thoughts going through your head as you're flying back to the U.S. to try to, kind of be reinserted back in everyday life?
Looking forward to it greatly.
Yeah.
Just leaving that country. I remember being on the helicopter leaving where we were stationed, like specifically our area of operation, and just thinking to myself, basically, like, technically we could still get attacked if we're in the air, but the chance of that was pretty slim. And just remembering, like, sweet, like, fucking made it. Like,
did you know instantly, like, you're like, I'm definitely not going to do this again?
No, not at all. I wasn't coming back like, wow, fuck that whole thing. Like, that was completely terrible. It was, for a lot of Marines, going over to country and actually serving and doing your job is really, really important. So if you train your entire Marine Corps career to, like, for an infantry job, you're training to fight all the time, and you don't actually get to do that or use any tactics or anything that you learned to perform your job and your duties. When that doesn't happen, there's oftentimes like some form of regret, even though it's not their fault. So I was totally stoked on the fact that we actually went over there and we were able to do our jobs. It gave, a huge sense of purpose, and that's usually what Marines are looking forward to. So
what were you looking back on it? What do you think was the most impactful thing that you still kind of, use in your everyday life, as far as like a thought process, or, having have a structure to your daily life? What do you think you brought back as it'll stick with you forever?
Probably the biggest thing is just, as an overall life lesson, is just kick your own ass, kind of. When you put yourself in situations where you are immensely challenged and you overcome it, it's a really good thing for you. So I would, say that that's a huge part of it, especially just kind of gaining the mentality of, well, look at what I've done with this, and these things were really, really difficult, and I was able to, surmount them. So now you can look at everything else in your life that way, with that same mentality of, I've been through worse, or yeah, this is going to suck, but I know I can do it. You know what I mean? Put one foot in front of the other and you keep going. So I think that's probably the most valuable lesson that I learned coming out of the service, was just to adopt. Yeah,
just
really,
grinding it out.
That's what everybody's doing. Some people do it a lot better than others, and it's just a reminder that, yeah, I just got my ass kicked a lot, and there's nothing wrong with getting to kick some more. So,
and then that says a lot to our daily lives now, because everything's so easy for us over here, and you have internet at your fingertips. You can go get any food you want with just a 5 mile drive of your car.
Mhm.
So I think that's something I talk about this on the podcast is just grinding it out and putting yourself and getting uncomfortable with, little stuff. So when you are challenged in the day, it doesn't seem as hard because you ran 5 miles or did something where it was challenging to your mental capacity as far as your everyday life.
Right.
But so back to the PTSD thing. What did you have anything that kind of triggered it when you came back where you kind of saw it, like, did it creep up on you and then you're like, "Oh, I think I have something going on."
Um, it's kind of odd, honestly. Like, that type of thing is hard to nail down. What I would say is that there's a misconception about post-traumatic stress disorder, and that it's not really a disorder, based, on how maybe some medical professionals would describe it. So I think what they're doing with the whole disorder thing is it becomes a disorder when it cripples you so much that you can't actually do everyday life things. And I could totally understand that there's people that have been through so many things too much at the time and too frequent that something does actually kind of break, and they need different approaches, in terms of help and stuff like that. But for the average, let's say any type of service member that goes through a traumatic event, um, basically what's happening is your lizard brain's survival mechanism is remembering this thing, right? So there's this whole science behind the emotion behind things. Like when you experience an emotion with an event that's happening, it burns that memory into your skull so much more. It's like it's more visceral.
It's like any time you get punished when you're a kid, you remember that,
Right.
no matter how young you are.
Right.
Like if you got spanked, you're like, I got spanked when I was 3 because I fucked this up, or something like that.
Correct. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same idea. The emotion is fear, and your brain remembers exactly what that's like, so it automatically tries to mitigate, right, having this issue. So all it is just recall and a survival mechanism. So it's more appropriate to just call it post-traumatic stress, because if, let's say you were involved in a few different explosions, if you're overseas, and you come back and there's like a loud concussed sound, whether it's a door slamming or a car backfiring or whatever, and that individual that experienced that takes a knee and instantly, gets defensive, for that split second, that person didn't actually do that consciously. That was literally their brain taking over and going into fight mode. So you have fight or flight. You can either face the threat or you can run from it. And if you've been trained to face the threat, then you're going to face the threat and you won't think about doing that. That's not a disorder. That is totally normal behavior. That is how the human brain works. That's how every animal's brain works. That's what keeps them alive. It's literally a trait.
Now, you said you were on a bunch of medication when you came back to try to numb the feeling, or it numbed the feeling. Now I know MAPS is working with MDMA and psilocybin. What do you think the kind of effect those types of drugs has on someone that's going through something like that?
Yeah, so I didn't really know what to expect, or, as far as like taking certain medications that was prescribed to me upon getting back. Honestly, didn't understand whether they were supposed to numb you or, make you see things in a different perspective, or what the whole point was. But what I found, and I stopped taking them pretty recently after starting, because they just made me feel like shit. I didn't like it. I felt kind of zombified. And through experience, I realized that they really didn't do anything to address a problem. They literally just suppressed it. So they suppress your emotions. You're just kind of groggy and out of it, and you're just not really present. And when you see this happen to somebody that's on these medications for years, like the life has just gone out of their eyes. So I don't think that that's necessarily the right approach. Some people do need medication for certain things. Absolutely. And if it's working as a part of their treatment plan and they're actually making progress, then for sure, go ahead and do that. But I do see a correlation, not necessarily a proven one, but I do see a correlation between the rates of so-called post-traumatic stress disorder and medication use being a factor in basically numbing these people and not addressing a normal situation. Well, I shouldn't say a normal situation. It was an abnormal situation, but they're having a normal reaction to it. And because they're not told that, they're told, basically that you're going to be fucked up. You're going to need to go see counseling. Here's pills for this, 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 and this. They're pretty quick to diagnose you with PTSD. And then you sit there basically and not meaning to necessarily kind of adopt that victim mentality of, oh, well, this is what all these medical professionals are saying is normal and what's supposed to happen. And well, shit, I do kind of feel that way. So let's go ahead with this plan. But really what that's doing is it's pushing you away from just being a normal human being and addressing the problem and realizing, yeah, I went through some shit back there that was crazy. Let's reflect on this normally, right? And get through it. If they're told that on the other side, that it's totally normal to act that way in an abnormal situation, that needs to be the olive branch that's extended, not pills. And so to answer your question about like psilocin and stuff like that, and MDMA, those types of drugs have been shown scientifically to basically open different channels in a person's brain, and different compartments of your brain communicate with each other that normally don't. And what they're known for is basically kind of tearing down the walls of your ego. So that gets completely set aside, and you can really internalize and look at yourself. It's a very introspective process. And those types of things are very helpful when you can put that sense of pride or ego or whatever it is that's preventing you from seeing what's going on, when you can put that in the back seat and kind of look inward to yourself, people really start to examine certain issues and how to actually solve them. Whereas the prescription medication, that goes through the VA, I have found to do the complete opposite. It suppresses and it numbs and dulls. So you never get a chance to actually do it. And then you get this snowball effect where somebody had, maybe it was a big problem, but now it's just becoming an even bigger and bigger and bigger problem. And this can go into things like veteran suicide, where you have 22 veterans killing themselves every single day. And that's just about half the stats. I mean, about half the states don't actually report their suicide rates. So, or I guess maybe I should say specifically to veterans. I don't know if they do with civilians, but whatever. Anyways, the point is that you have these pills that aren't really doing anything, and then you have the alternative, drugs. They are still drugs, but alternative procedures that can be done that have been proven to be very, very effective, and they're not really looked at as a serious option. No, I shouldn't say they're not looked at as a serious option, but they're kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? When you dismiss them because there's such a stigma. There it is. There's like kind of a stigma behind it. So,
well, I think a lot of people could benefit from not looking at the ego. I mean, it seems like that's in everybody's daily life. Like that inner soul saying, like, you want to be this certain way, like you said earlier, like you're naked when you're on something like that.
mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, could probably use that as far as, heads of businesses trying to be more sympathetic to their employees, just in everyday life. I think it would be beneficial if everyone if there was a protocol center where you could go and be like, hey, I need to work on myself. And you have a therapist there talking you through. Everybody has shit in their head that happened when they were younger. And, I have stuff deep down in my head that I never talk about. So to let that ego go and get it out and figure out where this issue's coming from in my thought process or anything like that, I think it'd be highly beneficial for anybody to be able to do that, not just veterans and having to go through this whole thing. If you had the doctor where you could go and be like, I have issues with this, I want to do your guys' procedure and fix what I have going on in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But besides you didn't take any drugs as far as that, right? It was just you went through groups and talk about the group talks, and you said it was all veterans, so you could almost let the ego go at the door when it's all your fellow peers that you're talking to and not just a normal civilian that has no idea what you guys went through. Does that make it easier to kind of work through your guys' issues together when you're all going through the same type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a veteran organization in San Miguel, California. It's called Mighty Oaks, and it's a faith-based organization, but everybody that runs it are former military, a lot of Marines, a lot of combat veteran Marines. So a wealth of experience and knowledge